Welcome into another episode of They've Got Now. I am super excited to be joined today by original guest, second time back on the pod, longtime friend, Cora Hall from Knoxville News. Cora, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, always excited to chop it up and talk ball and get back on trail. I guess first thing I got to ask you, because this season has been long and we are eerily close to the conference tournament. I was literally looking at conference tournament dates yesterday. I was like, oh wow, that's 2 weeks from now. So how are you feeling? What's been maybe the biggest surprise or something that's caught you off guard a little bit this year with respect to the SEC or just nationally?
Yeah, no, I had the same realization like last week of how few games there are left in this season. I was like, wow, I'm not stressed out about that at all. Just I got my SEC hotel booked though, so I'm ready for Greenville. Um, I would say the biggest surprise for me, I guess, has been how much chaos there has still been, pretty much top to bottom. Um, I feel like last year we had a few more teams who were more like didn't really drop that many games or didn't really catch you by surprise with a loss. And this year it's like only South Carolina, which is like incredible and such a testament to that program that we're even more like they're even more heads and shoulders above everybody else this year than last year when they had the freshies, which has been really fun to watch. I love watching that team. And the young players and which players are, contributing different nights and just makes them so hard to game plan for everyone else. But yeah, I think what has surprised me, especially as a voter, is like ACC. There's no hierarchy. There's like nothing that you can rely on there. And I feel like every time you're like, okay, yeah, like I feel good about where I'm putting this team. All of a sudden they lose to somebody and you're just like, what's going on? Um, and I think we knew the Pac-12 going in was going to cannibalize itself, and it very much has. But Oregon State is someone who also surprised me. Um, just because like I think it's really interesting when you have your star be someone so young, like Reagan Beers. So, you never know how someone's going to do their sophomore season or how much they're going to elevate their game or how much better people can game plan for them. But like that team has really gone to another level around her. So that's been really fun to watch too. But yeah, I think just how much more parity and chaos top to bottom there has really been this season has stood out.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like you mentioned that. I think last year, like Stanford losing to Washington towards the end of the year was like the big, like, oh wow, top five surprise that happened. Um, but this year, like Stanford has been awesome and they're 23-3. And I say that like it's obviously it's not a bad thing, but like that's been pretty clear cut the second best team in the country this year. And even they have three losses. So and that's just that hasn't been typical the last couple of years. So having it be at that level is really fun. And you mentioned Washington, like they had, I don't know if you got to watch, but their game that went to overtime against Washington last week was insane. Uh, I wrote about this in Bubble Watch, but Washington has played, I think, six overtimes in their last four games. That team has just been like brutally on the wrong side of a lot of close games. They're very Oregon State of last year.
Mhm.
But they're still very good and very tough, and I think they're going to probably upset somebody before the year's over. But um, no, exactly like you're saying. I mean, the ACC has just felt like there's no rhyme or reason, except the issue is that there are rhymes or reasons. Virginia Tech beats North Carolina State because they can't guard Liz Kitley, and she's awesome. And she's averaging like 26 points per game over her last 10. It's basically since Virginia Tech lost to Duke in that really wonky game at Cameron Indoor, they've just blitzed everybody. And they have the chance to move that to 10 straight wins now. With I think they play I think they play tomorrow. I think they play tonight. But that's been nuts. The Big 12 went from feeling like we knew what was going to happen, then Roy Harmon got injured, and then it felt like we knew what was going to happen again because Kansas State started pulling away, and then Aoka Lee got injured, and then I don't know what's going on now. We'll see what happens. The Big 12 is nuts. The Pac-12, there are still like four teams, five teams that are all in contention for the second spot with a million tiebreakers mixed in. And then we'll talk about the SEC in a minute. But then the Big Ten is just that talk about no rhyme or reason. That's the Big Ten. The Big Ten has been just weird. I
Yeah.
don't understand the Big Ten this year. It doesn't understand me either, apparently, but it's been something for sure. Obviously, Ohio State has been incredible and Iowa's been very good, but top to bottom, just a what a weird conference. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting about the Big Ten is very like top heavy and that it's like it's very clearly the top three teams are the top three teams, but then the teams below them are like fringe, like really solid teams and like one or two wins away from being like one of the top teams in the conference, like a Michigan State or like Penn State before they, kind of fell off a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think the other interesting thing about Stanford is that I was when I've been voting them top two because I feel like the Pac-12 is like has the best like top teams. I mean, I think the bottom's not like I don't think top to bottom it's like the best conference, but I think like the top like six or seven teams are like some of the best teams in the country. So like for me, like it's not like it has to be like the number two team on my ballot is from the Pac-12, but I do think like being at the top of the Pac-12 is a very strong like statement to have on your resume. But I was looking at Stanford's conference schedule, and they did get somewhat of an easier conference schedule, just the way it shook out, because like they're not playing the LA teams twice, or I just feel like the like USC and like Colorado and Utah like have all had really, really hard like conference schedule in terms of who they're playing twice. So that has like helped Stanford a bit because they play like the Oregon teams twice. They play the Washington teams twice. And so they didn't necessarily have two matchups against some of the better teams in the conference this year, which is interesting. But I don't really think that takes away from what they've done. I just thought it was like it gave me better perspective for the next teams in the conference of okay, they're not that far behind just because they have a few more wins.
Mhm.
It's more so they had a little bit of a tougher shake in the top conference slate.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, especially too, like one of the hard things for me with the Pac-12, and I don't want to overweigh things compared to other teams, but I mean, doing the back-to-back Utah, Colorado road trip is the hardest road trip that anybody has to do in a
Cool.
power conference. So I always want to take that with a grain of salt and like weigh that, but also try and be fair with it because exactly like you mentioned, like they have out of the top six teams in the pack, I think they have had the easiest schedule in the pack. But then also they've played just about the best schedule outside of it. Like obviously they beat
Right.
Duke, who I think Duke, well, even though Duke is oscillated with being a top 25 team, I think that they're very much like some nights they can look like a top 10 team, other nights not so much. But they're very tough. Like Belmont is one of the best majors in the country, and they beat the shit out of them. Florida State is, I still think they're again, part of what's so interesting about the ACC is like it's all styles to me. Like the Pac-12, I feel like a lot of teams play fairly similarly. The SEC, I think there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, there are different schemes, but I think with how rosters are built, there's a lot of similarity. Ditto with the Big Ten, a lot more pace, just a lot of playing super spread out. But I think for me, the ACC is like, okay, well, Duke is going to play this super grind out, high pressure defense, and they play big, but also have a ton of athleticism. Florida State wants to run you off the court on either end, and ideally, their best defense is getting more possessions on offense. And Notre Dame wants to play a little bit slower and do more stuff in the half court, and they don't necessarily quite have the same level of big play as everyone else, but they have a lot of players who can do things skill wise. And then, you can go top to bottom with everything. And I think it just makes it so difficult to kind of evaluate some of the stuff because you just have to bake in like, okay, well, Florida State's probably going to lose to teams that have really good post players because their tallest player on the court at any time is 6'3", and they have like no depth in the post. So it's just really tough. And it's just, yeah, it's what a time. I'm enjoying it. So I wanted to ask though, like you mentioned in terms of being an AP voter, when you look top to bottom in how you're kind of handling this year, what has that been like having this much more parity and just in general a ton of kind of a very enigmatic season, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely grateful this is my third year voting and that I have a system that I use, or at least just kind of a better idea of like how I vote. Because if I hadn't, like going into the season would have been very stressful. And there have still been like weeks where I'm like, Sunday night, I'm done with the Tennessee game and I'm just like beat. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm waking up at like 6 a.m. tomorrow to do my ballot before 10 a.m. But I like have an Excel spreadsheet because otherwise I just can't keep anything straight. So I'll like keep track of like my rankings of where I've had them, where they were in the AP poll, people's net rankings, even though that's not like ranking. It's helpful.
Mhm.
Um, and then like significant or ranked wins and also like who they lost to. So that helps me keep track of like head to heads if I need to. Although like head to head really matters till it doesn't. Like that's really just like if you're really splitting hairs between a couple teams for me. Um, but I feel like I really value um who you beat, like strength of schedule, which is more, for non-conference play, but I try to watch big matchups, how they play against each other. Um, but it's been a journey. I think this season I tend to find myself voting a little bit differently from the majority of people, and I can't pinpoint why that is, but like I feel like there have been multiple weeks where I've been I will look at the final poll and be like, I don't, I just don't know where people are coming from. And I think there have been some unfair voting trends in regards to how people choose to vote certain teams. I think the most recent example I can think of is when Iowa lost to Nebraska and UConn lost to South Carolina that one week. And UConn drops like 3 spots, and Iowa drops 2 spots and stays in the top five. And like for me, that's like, what are we voting by at this point? Like why I feel like for me, like when I'm dropping teams and based on losses, like I try to keep it pretty square across the board of like how I do that. Like, who did you lose to? How bad was it? Like that matters to me. And so I think Iowa has been given, and I'm not trying to be a hater, like just Iowa has been given a lot of the benefit of the doubt that I think, which is funny. I think UConn used to get this. Like my first year in the poll, I think UConn used to get this treatment. And so it's just kind of funny to like watch how things change. But like I try to keep it very across the board in terms of how I drop you. And if I don't drop you as much for a loss, am I bringing the other team up and trying to be conscious of that aspect of it? But like
Mhm.
I put a lot of thought into my ballot. I take it like pretty seriously, and it's harder during the conference season because like ACC plays on the same night as SEC, and like I don't really get to watch a lot of other SEC teams. But I try to watch like as many games as I can handle, just because otherwise I'm like I don't feel like just watching box scores and I don't feel like that helps you. Like that's not really like the greatest way to do this in my opinion. So I try to watch, and at least especially in non-conference play when they're not same nights, that way I have an idea of like how this team plays and like how good I feel like they actually are going into conference play when I don't get to watch as many games.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of really good tidbits there. I agree. And it's not even just Iowa. Like there are so many teams that I feel like it's just been really odd seeing the fluctuation. My biggest one that I've been very vocal about this year, I don't, if you rank Gonzaga in the top 12 a month ago, there is no reason that they should have dropped. Like legitimately, they keep beating the shit out of their conference. Nothing changed from what they did in November or December. So if you're dropping them, shame on you. That's all I have to
Yeah,
say about that.
no,
But I've been very annoyed about that.
yeah, I think with me, I always have Gonzaga like in the teens somewhere
Yeah.
because I know how good they are, and I know like from non-conference games, like okay, like they're legit good, and it's just hard like in conference season where it's like I never am in a position where I feel like I can jump them that much unless everyone in
Yeah.
front of them is like losing terribly. But I always try to keep them like around 15, 14, like just because I mean, even if I'm dropping somebody, I try to drop below them and not fluctuate Gonzaga and like punish them just because, oh, other teams are winning. But they're definitely a hard one because it's like they're just not playing the same level of competition. So like, but I agree with your point. Like if you had them that high, then like you have to stand on that. Like you can't just
Yeah,
be
no,
like,
exactly. That's
now they're
that's where I've been
18.
at. But no,
Yeah.
because I think, I mean, it's a bad trend. But I literally like check every bracket every week just to see how people are voting. Not to be like Snoopy, but I just am interested. And so that was not a shot at you because I know you've been very consistent with Gonzaga all year. But it just always like it resonates for me heavily. So I'm like, dude, come on now.
Yeah.
Like we
And
just gotta be for real.
yeah, and I think this year especially they are like good. Like Ejim, super solid. Their guards really good. Like I think they're like probably the best they have been in the last few years. So I'm excited to
Mhm.
see them in the tournament.
That makes two of us. Before we talk about the SEC, I did want to just sprinkle in some more love for some mid and low majors because the coaching I think it's the Naismith Award finalists came out today, the top 15. And everyone who's on that list, super deserving. Not trying to take away from that at all. But my biggest thing, I just keep coming away from like there are so many teams in the low and mid majors that deserve love for incredible seasons that just rarely get highlighted like it. And I think like one right off top, Marshall, who I've consistently had on the 13 line in March Madness, I think like they are going to I was talking about this with somebody yesterday, but I think this could be like one of the first seasons where we like see a lot of maybe not like maybe the upsets don't happen, but I think some of the low seeds on AQs are going to be really tough matchups
Mhm.
for teams, especially in the wrong situation. Because like Marshall, they play like they have some size, but they play like pretty typically four guard. They shoot the shit out of the ball. They're like, top 10, top 15 in the country in assists per game, move it a lot. And they play really good defense too. Like, granted, it's going to look different playing up, but they have wins over Power Five teams. They've done good things. They literally, I think they started the year 500 and then lost their leading scorer from like the last 3 years of play. And now they've lost one game in the Sun Belt. And Sun Belt's been actually very good this year. James Madison, good team, not as good as they were with Kiki Jefferson, but still good. There's a lot of good stuff there. But that team, like that's their first year under Kim Caldwell, who was a longtime coach in D2 that made the jump to D1 this year and has just done tremendous things with that squad. So I would be on the lookout for them. Obviously, Fairfield, who we've talked about a lot on here because they've been phenomenal, have gone through a little bit more bumpiness, but are still undefeated in MAC play. I think I'm always interested to see how teams respond when that happens, and it's been really impressive to watch. They've dealt with some injuries and stuff. Um, I still think A10 is going to end up with two bids. We'll see what happens, but largely Richmond has to win out. Otherwise, I don't think it's happening. There's just a lot of good stuff going on. That's the point. So I'm
Yeah.
very excited, but it's also like it's partially my job to make sure I know everything about all of the like, I got to know the 12 and 13 and 14 seeds as well as I know the one seed. So it's I have to be annoying about it slightly.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about the top 15 coach of the year list, I feel like that's a really easy place to give a nod to mid majors, at least one or two, because, okay, not all 15 of these Power Five coaches are going to be coach of the year. Duh. Like, you can slot in some mid major coaches who also probably won't make coach of the year, but that's a great place to like give them a little shine and a little like recognition for what they're doing because like going from D2 to D1 and losing so much of your roster and still doing what she's doing at Marshall is like very impressive. And I think I didn't even know that before today. So it's like that feels very like worthy of some recognition here. And I think that will those are things that, if you can point more people to the wider world of women's basketball, that's something that helps grow the sport. Instead of
Yeah.
just naming the same like 15 Power Five coaches every single year.
Yeah, no, exactly. And obviously, like it's going to depend what does or doesn't happen in conference tournaments for some of these teams. But like, I do just want to list off a couple more. Jackson State, I think I do not want to face them. If I am a team they are obviously they gave some teams difficulty recently in the tournament, but I
LSU.
think like yeah, yes. But that team is like they're so good defensively. They have a couple guards that can really get it done. And Angel Jackson is incredibly good on the interior and on the glass. I don't know if Daphne White's going to come back at all this year. I haven't looked up any of the news on that, but point being, that team is going to be really tough. They're so good defensively, and they tested the shit out of themselves in non-con. And lastly, Chattanooga. They beat Mississippi State this year. Everybody remember them for that, but they're 20-3. They are really good. They have that. I would say that they're even better than they were last year when they made the tournament. Or no, I'm trying to remember if they made the tournament last year. I might be wrong on that. But point being, this is year two under Sean Poppy, formerly at Virginia Tech, and they are really good and very tough. Not just to pat myself on the back, but I really liked Jada Gwynn. I believe she was at East Tennessee State last year or Tennessee Tech. I can't remember off the top of my head, but she's averaging like 20 points per game in an even better conference this year. That team is just really good. So again, there's a lot to be excited about mid-major wise, as my dog is chiming in as well. But
Yeah, I remember when Tennessee played Chattanooga last year, and it's like, yeah, Tennessee blew them out, but they were good, and so that ended up being like a really good win for Tennessee because like Chattanooga was still really solid last year. Like they're consistently a pretty solid mid-major team.
Well, now that we've done that, let's move on to talking about the SEC and start off with Tennessee, obviously, who you cover. Um, the Vols are currently third in the SEC, have really bounced back after playing, I mean, arguably the most intense non-conference schedule in the country. It's right up there. Um, I guess to start, what were kind of your expectations for this team this year? Have they met them, or like, what has this season been like for you, and where are you kind of at with them right now with where they sit in the SEC and just at large?
Yeah, I think expectations, obviously, I think we all learned our lessons last year with like portal teams and like, okay, temper expectations a little bit. And I think there was another added layer to that with we don't know how quickly Tamari is going to be back to playing a lot of minutes, playing like herself again. So I think there was a lot more tempered expectations going to the season. I still thought going to the season like they could pretty solidly be an Elite Eight team, depending on how things shook out. And I think once Rickea got injured after the second game, any expectations that I had for what this team was going to look like quickly like went out the window for that time until she got back. Um, because it's hard, and obviously that's like a roster construction issue, right? Where it's like you're one player away from being, in crisis mode. But I think when you have the roster that you have and it's like built around this one player who like single-handedly affects every single thing that you do, and you lose her 2 games in after she's had like the best summer of her life, played really well against Team USA, played really well against Florida State, like looks like an All-American type season is loading, and then she's just like out for 8 games during all of your hardest games pretty much. So I think you saw like just a lot of growing pains and a lot of um issues were exposed, but at the same time it's like once Rickea's back, that's a different team. Like the way this team operates is completely different. And I think we're seeing them hit their stride later in conference play because of that, because you go through like your tough test in non-conference play without someone who's so central to what you do. So you don't get that time to like figure stuff out with that player. And so when she comes back, it's like, okay, well, now we have to figure all this out again in SEC play, which is kind of brutal. Um, I think there's a lot of factors into them putting together a really strong end of season. But I think the most important one is Rickea, and I think she is where they need her to be right now. I thought it was really interesting after the South Carolina game, and I was really glad that she said this because there had been a few games where she just hadn't super looked like herself, even though like we knew she's healthy, she's back, like, and she just didn't look comfortable, didn't really look like herself. And after the South Carolina game, she was, I asked her about, performing on this level in the most important game of the season so far. And she was talking about how she had just been in her head a little bit after an injury, and she hadn't wanted to get in the gym as much as she's used to because she was afraid of re-injuring, aggravating the injury she had earlier this season because it was a leg injury. Like, you don't want to put yourself back in a place to get re-injured. But she kind of like put that aside and just got back in the gym that week and did what she needs to do because like she's a very much like a routine player. She gets in the gym all the time. Like she needs that to feel confident and like go into games feeling like her best. Like she said that going into the AmeriCup last summer, they had been in Italy. And so she hadn't been getting in the gym like she's used to. And she was actually like really nervous because she was like, I haven't been getting in the gym. Like, I don't know how I'm going to play. Like, I don't feel confident going into this. And then she was like the best player on the team. So for her, it's like a lot of, I need to get in the gym. I need to get this many shots up to feel like ready going to this game. And I think we saw that with like Texas A&M or the other losses. Like there were shots that we're used to seeing her make, like whether it's a tough like fader or like just a really solid take that's like maybe only she can make look easy. And she was missing those. And it was kind of like I haven't seen that any like throughout her 2 years at Tennessee. And against South Carolina, and I think Vanderbilt, like she's making those. And so that's like a difference in like she's where she needs to be for the team to kind of round out around her and have them like be able to put together like a solid end of the season and postseason.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because you and I had talked about this offline. I think it was after the Texas A&M game. I hit you up. I'm like, man, like I know she's back and she's healthy, but like she really just does not look like herself yet. Um, and so having that South Carolina game was really huge. I mean, she was almost the best player on the court. Again, I think there are a lot of things we can talk about with respect to Tennessee as a whole, but like when you talk about what she brought in that game on both ends, I was so impressed. Like watching her go back and forth with Ashlyn Watkins was incredibly fun. That's one of my favorite things that I've watched this season. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I didn't expect Tennessee to quote unquote win that game. I know there were some fans upset about the fourth quarter. But honestly, to me, that was much more of like South Carolina is just a drastically better team at this point. They're more talented, they're more athletic. There's a lot there, but I think like it's hard for me to, in like the confines of this season, be upset about that game. Um, and like upset is like completely the wrong way to look at it. I think it's just in general, like when you're talking about consistency and where this team is at and where they can get to and what they've shown at times, like that felt like about right to me with how that game went. Like that's the kind of game I want to see from them. Like you get the full 40-minute effort, you get really good opportunities there. It's just you're playing the number one team in the country. There's not a whole ton you can do at the end there.
Yeah, and it's like Joel Spear held scoreless. Like that was, obviously a huge key for South Carolina winning that game because she is capable of putting up 30 points on 67% shooting. So for her to not be hitting her shots that night, if she makes a couple threes, like that's a different game. And the other thing that was really interesting that I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I'm glad Kelly did this is like that is the shortest rotation of the season. And maybe since I have been here, like she barely went eight deep. Like it was more of like a 7 player rotation. And that is like the shortest rotation they have played. So it's literally like that fourth quarter, like they were just gassed. Like,
Yeah.
and South Carolina could put second unit on there and be fine. So that was just the major difference to me in that game. And there were shots that Rickea missed in the fourth quarter. That's like, yeah, like her legs are just gone. Like it's so hard to last 40 minutes against South Carolina.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about having to play both ways. Like it's a lot. And it's not like trying to be like quote unquote like defeatist or whatever. It's just being realistic in the moment. Because like you mentioned, I think part of what's really hard in those games, like Jewel has been in my opinion, like the most important player for the team in a lot of ways since SEC play started. Like she went from kind of struggling a little bit to acclimate at the beginning of the year, or struggle is a little bit too much, but like I think there were expectations for her to come in and step in like she did at Wake Forest. Like I think obviously we knew it was going to take some time, but it really took some time to find that. And she's been that player in SEC play, and I'd argue better too. Like she's really gotten better at reading the second and third levels of the defense, been better as a playmaker. Her finishing's been awesome on the interior. Obviously brings what she does as a floor spacer, but I mean it's been huge for her. I think what just comes down to everything for me is just guard play as a whole. I think is the biggest tipping point for this team. Like I think Jasmine Powell has been very good and has really figured a lot of things out again in SEC play. But once you start looking at the bench and what the actual depth is and how many players can really create something easy in the half court, it gets really tough, especially when you're talking about the SEC and what just like I mean to me the SEC is like the most athletic conference. Like that stands out always. Like there's again like when we talk about pace of play with the Big Ten that stands out, but with the SEC, I think the physicality and ability to guard man to man always stands out. And I think to me, again, that just keeps being like the biggest sticking point with Tennessee this year and last year has been that because so often, I mean, I'm looking at this particularly from a draft perspective, but like people make a lot out of Rickea's turnovers, and I get it to a degree, but a lot of the turnovers are because she has to drive into nail help, and there are moments where she can definitely get a little bit of tunnel vision, but for the most part, like I don't think the floor is always the best space. Like they're often playing with two bigs who are non-shooters, and even if one's on the court that will take threes, they're not getting guarded like it. So it just, I think their play style has definitely hurt them a little bit the last year and a half. When you're talking about the highest level, again, I'm not trying to be unfair,
Yeah.
but it's definitely stood out a little bit.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Rickea's turnovers is I feel like usually when it's like a higher turnover game for her, like usually a few of those are officiating. Like she'll get called for travels sometimes, and I'm like, I don't think that was a travel. And so she gets hurt by that sometimes. And then, you know, she picks up a charge, turnover, you know, stuff like that, where it's like little things where it's like you don't necessarily see like the full context of that turnover number.
Hmm.
And the other thing is like she typically makes up for it with her assists. Like there have been multiple games this season where she's led the team in assists with like four, and she'll usually give you two or three, like minimum. So it's like I agree with your point a lot too. Like sometimes like she's put in situations where she just has to go make something happen and it might not always like pan out. And it's like, you know what, I'd still rather her do that in that situation
Yeah.
than whatever else the option was. But I think I agree with you a lot about the guard play. I think something that we don't talk about a lot is the fact that they lost Destiny Wells before she really got settled in, and we really got to kind of see that guard room get some chemistry and figure out kind of where they needed to go. So I'm excited to see her next year. Obviously excited to see Coop next year. But I think with Powell, I think is really interesting is like she had a really consistent stretch where she was like averaging like 7 assists a game for like 5 games, and they were playing really well. And it was partially due to like their pace being up. So like she could find like the easy pass inside and get someone a layup or in transition. But like I feel like when their pace slows down, like she struggles more to create in the half court. And I think their best games are when she is more she takes fewer shots and is more efficient, and she can pick and choose her moments efficiently to score, because she can score like well, you know, and they need that from
Mhm.
her. But I think when you get her taking double-digit field goal attempts, that's a game where you probably need to spread the ball out a little bit more, because you have someone like Sarah who I think has been such an underrated factor of this team all around. Like she has been so good defensively lately. She's been really, really efficient offensively, and I think there's games where they can get her more looks. Um, just been like such, and she always like is adding more assists and playmaking for them as well. So I think like games when they can get Sarah involved and like make use of what she gives them is really positive for them. And then obviously, yeah, I agree with you that Jewel has been like probably the most important player for them. Just because of her like the consistency she found, and like I was actually really surprised when she didn't score against South Carolina, because I saw that as a game where she's gonna give you like 12, 16 points and get some threes to fall. But, you know, sometimes it's not your night. And I doubt that's going to happen next time they play South Carolina. Um, but she's been so fun to like watch grow into the player that she is, because I mean, like she's playing at like an all SEC level. Like, obviously, we expected that. But I think it's really hard when you get to a team and you spend the summer with them and you have this style of play around Rickea, and then all of a sudden you don't have her, and now you're the focal point of everyone's defense, and like you're playing a harder schedule than when you're at Wake, and it's like there's all these expectations, and then you start overthinking. And I'm working on a story on her, and she was talking about how everything just started like she started overthinking everything. And it was just like the littlest things that she had to tweak over Christmas break when she went home. And her dad's a huge basketball guy, and they like went to the gym, tweaked some stuff with her shot. And it was just like, stop overthinking all this, you know, like just play, just it's just this. It's not like your shot's broken. Like, because for her, it was like her shot wasn't falling from deep in conference play. And then it was kind of like, well shit, okay. And like also like it was a lot different because like she's used to getting face guarded at Wake everywhere. She's the whole scouting report. And then at Tennessee, like it's not like, then when she was missing shots, like people are going under screens, and that's almost like a, oh my gosh, like now there's all this other pressure that I'm overthinking, and it's just so much different. You're trying to settle in this team without like the main player who you played all summer with. So it was just like a lot of factors in, and I would agree, like it was more of like a struggle to find consistency for her in non-conference play, because she would have like good games and then she would, you know, not be able to make an impact where they needed her to. So, and the other thing with that, I think she has a lot bigger ask defensively and rebounding with this team. So it's like you're trying to like add all these things into what you're able to do at the same time as scoring at the same clip, at the same time as trying to adjust to not having a dominant post presence inside with Rickea. So it's like all these things like came together in like this perfect storm that like made it really difficult for her to like kind of hit her stride. But now that she has, it's like it's been so fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think overall as a whole with this team, it's just like and we've talked about it too offline, but like I've just in general been willing to be higher with them when in doing stuff with the bracket because I mean I think it's so hard. Like every team to a degree has dealt with injuries in a way, but like this team has dealt with so many different injuries and outs and inconsistencies as a whole. And like obviously that doesn't take away from some of the losses that happen, but also I think it's just hard. Like when you get some grace when you play as hard of a strength of schedule as Kelly Harper put together. Like I just don't if if we aren't going to reward people for challenging themselves, then what's the point? So that's where I'm at with it. I did want to ask you lastly too, or not lastly, a couple more things to do, but I did want to ask you about Kaya Wynn because I love Kaya Wynn. She's one of my
Me
favorite
too.
players in the SEC to watch. She's honestly like because like you're talking about, and obviously I'm not in practice every day, so I don't get to see what things look like, but she's part of the reason I really wish they would lean into playing with more pace. And in some ways, like it's hard to play pace because Tamari's been really important for turning some things around defensively and also giving them some easier buckets on the inside. But she very clearly is like, and understandably, is like not all the way back conditioned yet. So it's really hard to play like kind of conflicting and clashing styles of pace. But like again, part of the reason I'd love to see them play with more pace is what Kaya Wynn can do because I think some of the best moments she's had is when she's able to run the break and just get to go be this dynamic slasher who can make some plays off the bounce and is really good defensively. Like I like her a ton.
I love Kaya Wynn. She is so easy to root for, such a great kid. I did actually, it's funny because I did a story on her last year during the tournament because we had open locker rooms, so it was like super easy to get this put together about just
Hmm.
like why she was kind of like an unsung hero on that team and like the role she plays, just how hard she plays in practice, the way she constantly is putting work in, the culture that she brings to the team, and just like how great of a teammate she is. So it's like really cool to see her grow from that to like I thought even before Destiny Wells got hurt, like I wanted more minutes for her just
Same.
because like, on the wing, you don't like if you have Jewel hitting threes, if you have Rickea hitting threes, like you don't need like you can afford minutes for Kaya, who is not really going to hit threes, because of what she brings everywhere else. So and it's funny you bring that up because about pace because Kelly always wants them to have like that pace, like that's the pace she likes. Um, so, but it is hard because with Tamari, like it's so hard to like get your body all the way back to like where you were before. And like I remember when they played Mississippi State, Tamari played like all 10 minutes of third quarter, but she was able to do that because of the timeouts. Like I think Sam called like two timeouts that along with the media timeout. So like she had those chances to like catch her break and she could run the floor. I mean, I thought that was Kaya's best game of the season. Um, because she's just like if she gets the rebound, and she's a great rebounder. She's like down the court in like 2 seconds.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
crazy.
like it's awesome. And I think she is so valuable to this team. And I think there are times when there was definitely growing pains early on, and I feel like we've seen a little bit less of her recently, but like what she brings to this team is very much undeniable. And I love when she can like she'll come up like now and have like a really important bucket that like is probably not going to get remembered in like the grand scheme of things, but like in that moment was like very important or like a rebound or a steal. And I love what she brings defensively. I thought again, Mississippi State game when Kaya and Jewel and Jasmine played a lot of minutes together, I thought their perimeter defense was so good. I thought the chemistry looked so good, the communication, their ball screen defense was like pretty much perfect. I remember watching it back and I was just like, what why can't they play like this every game? Like this ball screen defense is like amazing. And I think those three like give you such a good look on the perimeter from a defensive side.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where this roster keeps going with that. You know, obviously that's a future thing, but I know they have some really good athletes coming in the next couple classes, but like again, how they continue to build around that's going to be interesting to watch because I think it's a really important inflection point for where they're going in terms of how they keep building out. But you mentioned the rest of play, and obviously this team has played really well of late, a little bit more up and down. Like obviously, I think the South Carolina game was really important. The Alabama game was definitely a bit of a bummer because that was pretty much like out of their grasp the entire game. That just they did. I don't know what happened in that one. It just never really felt like they were in it off rip. And to be fair, Alabama's really solid. I think I have them on a 7 seed still right now. But I think when you're talking about aspirations the team has, like that's a game that they kind of needed to take. But obviously a very big stretch to close out because they get to play LSU on Sunday. They play Texas A&M next week, who they got absolutely destroyed by, which that's Texas A&M's an interesting team. And then they get to play South Carolina in Columbia for the final game of the regular season. How are you feeling about these last 3 games?
I think after this last week, a lot better than before that week. I think I agree with you. The Alabama game was kind of a bummer, just because like I just felt like there wasn't really one area that I like felt like they were meeting their standard in. Like I felt
Mhm.
like defensively things weren't good enough. Um, Offensively things weren't like nothing was getting into rhythm. I didn't feel like they were able to really do what they wanted. And big part of that, it was kind of like deja vu with Jasmine Powell getting into foul trouble in the first half and not getting a lot of her in the first half. Like that was really difficult for them because I think their starting lineup has really found a good chemistry. And like the fourth quarter, they started on like a 10-0 run with the starters in, and they were right back in that game. So it's like not having Jasmine Powell in that first half, and I say deja vu because that happened to Auburn. She got quick foul in the first, took her out. Quick foul in the second quarter, took her out. She played like maybe 5 minutes. And so Kaya Wynn got a lot of run, and that was like maybe her third game playing point guard. So that game got really close because they didn't have Jasmine in that first half. And in the Alabama game, like they didn't have her a lot in the first half, and that hurt them a lot. Just in terms of getting into an offensive rhythm. And when they came back in that fourth quarter, I was like, okay, like, are they gonna do this? And then like I think Rickea picked up a fourth foul and Kelly took her out. And then like Tamari might have gotten a fourth foul and then Kelly took her out. And it was just like a really weird ending of the game. So, but that one was one that like they really did need to win because that gives you a little insurance for like, I don't know, if you like don't beat Texas A&M. Like I feel like though, I feel better about that matchup at home for them.
Yeah.
And I have no idea if India Rogers is going to be back and that team's offense like is really struggling without her. So I think that will be interesting. I think I feel a lot better with where they are now and also playing that matchup at home where like I think they should be and it's senior night. So like you got to get a win on senior night type vibes and it's the last home game of the season. So I think like I feel good about them going to that game. LSU is really interesting because I think like a lot of it just depends on like who shows up that day. Because I think this team, the way they're playing is capable of beating them. But I also think they're also like LSU is playing really well right now. So like if you don't bring like your best in every area, like you're not going to win that game. So, but I think will be interesting though is the fact that like LSU doesn't have someone who can match up with Tamari. So can you, like the Georgia game, take advantage of that and really get Tamari some quick, easy looks inside, get 10 and 8 out of her again? Like that's going to be huge. And that's where they couldn't do that against South Carolina. Um, just for one reason or another, probably also because Camilo exists. Um,
Yeah.
but I think getting her involved, getting that like, because it just looks so. Tamari looks so much more confident in all areas right now, and so if you get her the ball in the post, like she's probably gonna go score it like pretty easily, especially if there's isn't someone there like Camilla. So I think getting Tamari involved is important. I do think the pace of the game is important, so like her minutes are gonna be kind of interesting in that respect. Um, but like I feel good about, the way Rickea is playing right now. I don't think Jewel is gonna, go scoreless again. I mean, she played really well against Vandy. She started off hot. I think the key for Jewel too has been being really aggressive in that first half. Either um, usually getting inside, being aggressive with getting into the paint, finding some opportunities there, but also like getting that three to fall in the first half. They can, get her on rotation, kick it out to her. So I think that's important for her too, is like being aggressive from the start, getting some points early, feeling good about it. Um, and then, can you get like 6, 7 assists out of Jasmine again? Can we get that version of Jasmine Powell where she's finding those opportunities to play make and being efficient offensively with her own shots? So I think they're capable of doing it. I just think it very much depends on like, can you bring it in all these areas?
Yeah, I agree. I think like getting big minutes, like can they really get something out of Jillian Hollingshed off the bench too? Because I think like winning the front court, like it's not winning the front court battle might even be the wrong way to say it, but it's like just making things hard. Like having
Mhm.
Tamari there is huge because I think as incredible as Angel and Anissa have been, like overall, again, like if you can just force the misses, get the rebounds, you know that this team is not going to shoot that well from deep. Like that's just been LSU's struggle all year. It's very much like South Carolina of last year. Obviously, they're not that same level of talent. But like talking about like, okay, well, if you can just win the possession battle against them, I think that's huge. Like take care of the ball, make things hard, and I think you have a really good chance. And like you mentioned, being at home, like I feel a lot better about this game than I did a week ago. So I'm excited to watch it. But LSU has also played really damn well lately, so that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, I'm glad you brought up Jillian because she has been like a super consistent rebounder. And I think when she gets comfortable offensively early, it's really good for them because like she's had a couple games where even if it's like 8, 9 points off the bench, like that's a huge difference.
yeah,
And especially if she's gonna grab like 7 to 10 rebounds. And or even just like put a body on Angel every single time on the offensive glass for them. Like keep her off the offensive boards if you can. Like that's gonna be so important. Or even just like Anissa, like, but can you get her the right minutes where she's just providing a really strong presence down low, getting on the boards. She's also a good playmaker. Like she makes the right pass. Like in her best game, she's got like 3 or 4 assists. So like just can you get her involved and get what you need out of her for that night? Because like I really am interested to see like what she can do next year. Just because like I feel like this year's been so up and down for her, and there's
yeah.
some games where she's looked so good, and then other games where like either she doesn't really feel like she gets enough minutes to like make an impact, or she just doesn't like look like she's playing at the level she's capable of. So like I feel like getting the best out of her is also like a huge X factor in this game.
Yeah, no, I agree. And correct me if I'm wrong, she's been banged up a little bit this year too, right?
She had like a shoulder thing in the
Yeah.
summer, that she's had like a shoulder brace like most of the season. I don't know if she's worn it like in the last month, but like definitely like the beginning first half of the season, she had like a pretty big shoulder brace on.
Yeah,
I know that was probably a factor, but like, yeah, I think it's also just like finding the right offensive opportunities for her because like
for
she
sure.
didn't being a huge back to basket player. Um, and they really wanted to get more of that out of her. And I think she's definitely started to like find her, level of comfortability in that.
Definitely. Well, I'm excited to see what that can look like. Well, to close out, I do want to just bounce around the SEC a little bit because this conference is interesting to say the least. Um, we mentioned Texas A&M, like you said. I think with India Rogers out, like that's just really hard for their offense. Like even with India, like their offense has struggled a little bit this year. And to be fair too, like this is Joni's second year. That was a pretty big rebuild overhaul. I've just been impressed that they've been at this level this year. And their defense is nasty, so they make every game hard. Except for the ones where they score like 19 points and a half. Those are kind of difficult.
Mhm.
But as a whole, I've been impressed with them, but I think they continue to be just very up and down. Depends on the matchup. Do you think anybody in this group will really stand out as like the third or fourth best team alongside Tennessee? Because
Ooh, that's a
Ole
good
Miss
question.
has kind of started to a little bit, but they've also been pretty up and down.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about the SEC is Kelly said something after the Arkansas game that I was like, that makes a lot of sense. She said, I'm gonna just read the quote because I got it. She said the consistent teams are going to rise. I think this year, one of the things we've seen is it's a little bit more about matchups because you're trying to figure out how this team beat this team, but then this team beat this team. And a lot of times it's matchups, and everybody in our league is really good and everybody can win. And I think that's like true in a sense because I feel like last year, like South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee, were like we're not really bound to that like matchup like falling into matchups and losing in that sense because they had more talent. And then LSU loses who they loses. They obviously bring in transfers. Tennessee loses Jordan Horston. Um, but I think for LSU, like when they lost Samaya Smith to that injury, I think that made them more like susceptible to losing games due to matchups because like your front court isn't just like so freaking good that you're gonna just pound everybody.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't have that height inside. So I think like without her, it's like now LSU's guard play has to like basically win their matchup battle and be really elite. And like I think that's where you've seen them lose games is like when their guard play hasn't shown up, like with Haley and Michaela, who's incredible, but she's also a freshman in the SEC. So it's like she's not gonna be able to like put up 20 points every single night when you like kind of need that in the games that you lost. So I think that's been something interesting to watch and why like this year LSU has dropped some games outside of South Carolina. Like, and also I think, playing a weaker non-conference didn't help them in a sense, be able to perform that well on the road or to have bad games on the road like they have. And I think now it's even out because Poa is getting more minutes at point guard and they found a better balance guard wise. Just because Haley's playing out of position and I just didn't think that ever really took off.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the matchup point is such a good aspect to think about because like you mentioned, Auburn gave LSU so much trouble because they are so dynamic off the dribble and they run dribble drive. And if you can't stop them, they're getting to the rim every time. And their defense is just really hard to play against too if you can't handle ball pressure. So very bad for LSU. But then, okay, you turn it around to South Carolina, who is awesome handling ball pressure, and they're going to meet you at the rim, and they're also going to guard you a lot better on the perimeter. So good luck trying to run dribble drive against them. Um, but then again, okay, like you take Mississippi State against LSU, and they have really dynamic guard play. It's not always consistent, but like they have a lot of players who can spread the floor, who can attack out of ball screens, and that can be really hard to defend. And it's just there's a lot. And then like you take Florida, who is granted their defense has been all over the place this year, but like I mean, Aaliyah Matharu and Leilani Correa are two of the best scorers in the league, and if you lose them off a screen, they're hitting a shot or getting to the rim and making stuff happen. That's just good luck with that. So everything has been really difficult, but I just want to see the consistency. I don't think it's going to happen. But I think mainly I don't know, ever since I started doing the bracket stuff 2 weeks ago, all I can think about is in some of those terms. So like for me, right now it's really tough because obviously South Carolina and LSU are like they're shoo-ins. Regardless of what happens the rest of the year, both those teams are locks to make the field. But that's kind of it for the SEC. Like there are, I believe I had eight teams from the SEC in my poll, not poll, in my bracket yesterday. But 6 of the 8 teams are on the 7 or bubble. So it's like that's really tough. I think Ole Miss has like started to cement themselves as a team that's going to be in the field. Alabama has always been close to it, but then they again, the matchups can be really difficult for them, and then they end up losing one. And it feels like none of the games that people have lost this year are close. Like it feels like every loss everybody has in the SEC is double digits. I don't put numbers to it because it's probably wrong, but it sounds correct in my head. So it's just like I don't entirely know what to make of it. And again, like outside of South Carolina, nobody has massive non-conference wins. So it's like it just makes it really hard for the SEC as a whole um to have a lot more teams in the upper end echelon of the bracket. And if everybody keeps beating the crap out of each other, it makes it that much harder as well. And then it also makes it way harder for me to create the one seeds compared to the 8s and 9s because trying to figure out how to not have an SEC team in the first matchup with South Carolina was actually really difficult because I think I had 4 teams, 8 and 9 seed from the SEC. So that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's been a really weird year for the SEC because like and Mississippi State is like such an interesting team to me because I thought they were going to be more consistent, but I also feel like they didn't have like anybody on their non-conference schedule. So like besides their ACC SEC like matchup, I was kind of disappointed and I think maybe if they had gone out and tested themselves a little bit more in non-conference play, that they would be in a better spot in the SEC because I think they have the pieces. I just think like there's been like inconsistency that just is like I don't know. It's like hard to know what to make of them because it's like you beat LSU and then you go into overtime against Kentucky and then they beat someone else and then you get blown up by 20 by Florida, who again, like you said, Florida is a team I thought would be better this year. Just because of their guards. Like I thought like if they get what they needed to out of Faith Dude, then like their guards would be able to, handle the rest of it. And I definitely thought they're gonna be in a better position right now in the SEC. But the middle of the pack has just like completely cannibalized itself. Like it's so crazy. Like it's so up and down. Like and it's hard to know what to make of it, so I don't envy you at all. But yeah, I don't know. I think the last couple weeks are gonna be really interesting in terms of like the SEC tournament because um I'm pretty sure LSU and South Carolina are the only two teams that solidly have a double bye. Um and LSU might not even solidly have that until after they win, if they win tomorrow. Um, but you've got like LSU 9-3, Tennessee's 9-4, Ole Miss 8-4, Alabama and Mississippi State 7-5, Arkansas 6-6. Like depending on how like Tennessee, if they don't beat LSU and they only beat Texas A&M, they're gonna end up 10-6, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So then that probably slides them out of a double bye. Like I think if they don't beat LSU, like I don't think they're getting a double bye because of how close like what is it, 4, 5, 6, 7, how close 4 through 7 are. Like I don't really see that happening because Ole Miss also has a really easy like end of their schedule. Like they play Georgia, Missouri, like bottom like half teams. So but also it's Ole Miss. So like I don't know, like maybe they have a stinker and they lose somebody they shouldn't. I don't know. I could see that happening too. But Ole Miss has a really easy last 4 games. Alabama has a tough stretch to end the season. I know they play South Carolina, they play Texas A&M maybe, but Alabama doesn't have an easy end of season, so who knows what will happen with them. I think Mississippi State has a little bit easier end of the schedule. So I think it's really interesting to see how this plays out, who's getting double byes, like, and like if you're Tennessee, if you can't get that 3 seed in the tournament, do you really want number 4 and play South Carolina in the semis? Or 5, you would also play South Carolina in the semis. Like, would you rather just be number 6? Like, I don't know. That would suck. Like, just like on its face, but like you'd be on the other side of the bracket. So I don't know. It's gonna be chaos, and I think SEC tournament will also be chaos. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially too, like, I mean, there are some teams that like just cannot afford to lose to close the year. Like Vanderbilt obviously had that really tough stretch where they dropped 5 straight. Pretty much every game close except for the LSU game and most of South Carolina. So I guess not every game close. But then they picked some stuff up and then got absolutely hammered by Tennessee in a
yeah,
game like they could not afford to have happen. And then, but
yeah,
I mean, they play Arkansas, Missouri, and Georgia. So I think
yeah.
that's like a very winnable 3 games for them. But
Could be.
they'd still probably be on the bubble even if they win all 3. So it's like, I don't know, man. We'll see what happens. There's a lot to be excited about. But Cora, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we get out of here?
Um, no, I'm excited for the end of the season. I'm excited to see what shakes out. I think this is gonna be like a conference. I mean, I don't know if there's gonna be as many upsets like you said, like as last year, but also like I didn't really know what to think going into last year's tournament. So I think there's gonna be surprises and it's gonna be a lot of fun. I think for Tennessee in terms of postseason, like I think it's always been this, but I think it's very clear at this point that it's like this team will go as far as Rickea Jackson takes them. Um, and I'm looking forward to seeing like how she continues to kind of like elevate herself, like or just her level of play throughout the end of the season because I do really think like she's at a place now where she's comfortable again and she's hitting her stride and I feel like we're almost like because I feel like it's so funny like going into this season it's like we're gonna see like this all-American season like she's ready to take the country by storm like we can see it like in the way she played over the summer and then you get set back and then you got to come back and like get back into that and I think like she still has like this other level to her and I'm like very excited to see especially since like last year was her first NCAA tournament that's like a lot, especially when they were hosting. Like, so I think like we didn't see the best of her, and I think we will this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think anytime I think about Rickea, I just can't get the Florida State game out of my head. That's still one of like the single best games that anybody's played this year. Um, and that was just like we're talking about, like when like granted, it was Florida State and that defense has been I think their defense is better than it sounds most of the time when you look at it statistically, but when you talk about size, like that matters. But again, like so much of it was like being aggressive, finding your spots, attacking in every possible way. Like that's the Rickea Jackson that we're capable of seeing every game. And I think I'm just excited to see how she can do it the rest of the year because I agree in totality. It's this team's going as far as Rickea can take them, and that's very exciting for the last month of the season.
Yeah, I do actually have an interesting question for you about
Yeah,
Rickea Jackson. So, hypothetical, if for some reason Caitlin Clark decides she does not enter this year's draft, which like would be wild in my opinion, but if she doesn't, where do you think that what do you think that does to the lottery, and where do you think, Rickea could fall?
yeah,
In
it's
hypothetical.
it's funny. I've tried really hard to think about this one and like all the hypotheticals. Um, that's just like a nightmare for me in so for so many reasons, but also like just from trying to understand what that means. Honest to God, like I don't know, like because I think a lot of people would look at that, or like maybe like some analysts who would look at it and be like, oh well, you probably just trade Melissa Smith and draft Cameron Brink. And number one, you just can't remove the human element from stuff like that. Like that is unless that ends up being like a surefire you go to the playoffs this year type move. It's very hard to rectify that with agents, with players, with anybody. So it's never as simple as I think it gets made out to be like that. I know everybody wants to make it out about winning, which obviously it is about winning and building a successful organization, but a large part of building a successful organization is knowing how to make the right moves and not sacrifice what can be moves in the future or relationships in the future. Um, I say all that to say I think if it were to happen, I think if Caitlin Clark didn't go into the draft, I think Georgia Amore would go first overall, straight up.
Interesting.
That's where I would be. I just wrote about her yesterday because for me, like, it was really tough because I don't like, I mean, she's not a player I would take over Paige. Like, I love Georgia. I think she's phenomenal, but Paige and Caitlin are just on a different level when you talk about, what their immediate floor is, I think. And to be fair too, I think Georgia could be in that stage as well. Just a lot of it's about fit and opportunity. Because like the hard part is like coming from more of the NBA draft sphere, I had to like go from okay, well, it's all about potential, potential, potential to like obviously that's what matters here too, but it's about okay, who can come in and play right away and then grow from there. And I think if you don't have a spot for that to work for somebody, then why are you picking them? It's
Hmm.
it's not as simple as just saying, well, this player's really talented, get them on my roster. Okay, well, this is, we need this first round pick to be like a free agent for us at a discount cost. And if they're not, if my coach isn't going to trust playing this player, or there's not like actually a spot for them to play, it doesn't matter how talented you are. So I think for me, like I could like understand if Rickea went one, because I think she's definitely like got the talent. But I think with what Indiana needs and where I'd be at with them, I want to see them take a guard. It's like it's got to be a guard. Otherwise, trade the pick and make something happen so you can get a guard. Because I mean, I think we saw so much good from Melissa and Aaliyah together last year. It's all about supplementing that and building on top of it. And I think continuing to get more dynamic guard play and just on the wings too. Like I think overall, everybody pointed out the guard play last year and totally fair. I get it. But part of the reason I like some of the moves that they made this year is like as much as it maybe isn't sexy to sign Katie Lou Samuelson to that contract, like I am a lot more open to that than I think most people were, to be fair. But I will say Katie Lou was really solid in the season she was able to have in LA before she got pregnant. Um, which congrats to her and Devin. That kid is super cute. But I think the idea is like with how many okay, sorry, I'm going into a million different directions. With how many rookie contracts they have on that roster, I don't know what happened with Skylar. I don't know if that was ever actually in play. I that whatever. But like when you look at what they have right now and what they can do, Aaliyah's on a rookie contract. Melissa's on a rookie contract. You have until 2025 until you have to start paying those players at a higher level. So if you take the time now to bring in players on shorter contracts that are maybe bigger than market value, you can still get benefit and talent that surrounds those players while building for the future. So I think that's like the right moves there. Um, but yeah, it's guard play for me. Like I think it needs to
Mm.
be a guard. So I think long story short, I think the answer would be Georgia for me. I think Georgia would probably go first overall because Paige is out, and if Caitlin pulled out, I think it would be her. Um, but then it's tough too because like just looking at everything fit wise, like I know a lot of people want to see Georgia with the wings, and I just think that would be really tough. Like obviously she's super talented, brings a ton. That would be dynamic offensively, but you look at so much of what the Wings needed this last year, and it was okay. Well, we can't play our point guard, it was really tough because Crystal Dangerfield was really good for them last year. I think a lot better than her box score indicated. And the Aces just said, okay, we're going to post her up with Chelsea Gray or Jackie Young every single possession, and until you stop playing her. And then that absolutely killed their offense too, though, because she was really important in their offense. It's like, okay, well, if we bring in another guard who might have some of those same issues, that's tough. Like, how do we make that work? So it's point being, there are a million ways to look at it, and I might not be right in all of them, but that's just where I'd be at right now. Um, but that would be pretty wild.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be, I don't know. I think she needs to go. Like, you've done everything you can do in college. Like, just go be a pro now and
Yeah,
go somewhere where like there's a direct need for you and that you could like immediately impact like this team's ceiling.
yeah. That and like I just think too about like, okay, well, Indiana's pretty much Iowa, so like it's not, but it is. But
No,
you
I
know,
mean you're right,
it's
right.
it's
Very
right there.
like
Yeah,
there's a lot of cornfields there. Like
yeah, no,
Indiana
exactly.
is
So it
very like
could happen, but
yeah.
regardless, I mean, it's going to be intense. And I just, not to get like too ahead of myself, I just can't wait for the 2025 draft because I think like players going like almost as far into like the third round are players who would go in the first round this year. Like I think it's going to be that deep because of all the eligibilities that are going to be gone at the end of next year. Um, so it's exciting. But Cora, I've taken so much of your time. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, just you can find all my work at my Twitter, and I'm gonna have some features rolling out here. It took a little bit longer to start getting player features out for me this year, but should have a few coming out in the next few weeks, including on Rickea. So make sure to check that out. And I don't know, I'm excited for postseason to get here.
That makes two of us. Well, to everyone listening, I'll have Cora's stuff down below. Be sure you go follow, go subscribe to Knoxville News so that you can keep up with all of her work. And most importantly, have a great rest of your day. And thank you for listening.